Chair. The Board of Education meets and conducts school business in the public. The public is invited to watch and listen to the Board of Education deliberate and vote on agenda items scheduled for action and discussion. Although the Board of Education meets in public, this is not a meeting for the public to participate. It is the meeting for the 7 board members to conduct their business. After we are done, there is time for public participation. But I would like to say there are some rumors flying out there about us changing the meetings. I changed the meeting because there was nothing on the agenda that needed to be done for action. So I felt we were waiting for the audit report to get here. So we waited and changed the meeting for the audit report to get here. Our board members spend a lot of time. People don't realize how much time and effort it takes to be in a board member. Not only do they have regular meetings to attend to, they have committee meetings, there's county-wide meetings that we're required to go to, legislative meetings we're required to go to, there are state conventions, there are CBA classes that board members need to be taken and going to, plus several of our board members spend time on other committees. I, for one, if you're at the basketball games or the wrestling meets, volunteer my time to save the district money to keep score. And I'll tell you, these last 3 years have been the worst 3 years in the history of this district. Number one, we are in a deficit. We are working to improve our performance to the plan submitted to the state. We have to submit it. If the state don't approve it, we have to keep doing it until they do. We have 2 schools that are in the priority category, the PLA, and we are taking drastic measures to change those scores around with the allowable actions as defined by the Department of Education. Again, this is not us. We have to do what they tell us to do. We have no choice. Because of either number 1 or number 2, we currently are in a position where the state could come in, turn the entire school district into an EAA, which means the board would have no say, we would have no superintendent. Any actions that disrupt progress with regard to the deficit elimination program or the academic changes required by the PLA schools, and the state has a necessary incentive to move the EAA in here anytime or to close our school district. If the EAA takes over, we have lost all local control. With that, will those who can stand, please stand for the pledge. Go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Braun?
Here.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
And Mrs. Saban?
Yes. Is there any unfinished business? Hearing none, we'll go on to high school principal recommendation and appointment. The personnel committee got together and recommended to Mr. Hill that we hire the high school principal.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight, for your recommendation, I'm recommending that the board approve the appointment of Mr. Brian McCarty as the high school principal for Bridgeport High School.
Would you please stand so everybody can see who you are?
Hello, everybody. Boy, the welcoming party.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the appointment of Mr. Brian McCarty as the high school principal.
I'll make that motion. Support.
Motion by Jay, supported by Larry, to approve Mr. Brian McCarty as our high school principal. Roll call, please.
Mr. Braun?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
And Mrs. Saban?
Yes. Audit report by Yeo Yeo.
In front of you have your audit report. This is the landscape copy. You also have your single audit report. which is the portrait copy, your governance letter, which we'll talk about, as well as the presentation for this evening. We're going to go through the presentation. If we do need to dig any further into any of the audit report, single audit report or governance letter, we can do that. But I have summarized the majority of that into your audit presentation. So first of all, thank you very much for having me here tonight. The audit process is a three-step process. We look at the financial statements, which are the numbers, make sure that they are fairly stated, and they're in a presentation format that all Michigan school districts use. Then we look at your internal controls. We make sure that there's safeguards in place in the district to safeguard the district assets, as well as look at internal controls that are centered around financial reporting. Make sure there's the correct financial internal controls there for your financial reporting process. And then finally, we look at compliance. Your federal, state, and local compliance with contracts, laws, and regulations in those areas. So if we look at the financial statements, we did issue an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. The financial statements were fairly presented. We determined the financial information was properly accounted for. However, we did have an emphasis of a matter opinion, and that's due to the deficit fund balance, which was already mentioned earlier this evening. There is a deficit there, so we wanted to make sure that that was emphasized in your opinion. So if we look at the next slide, this is your balance sheet of your governmental funds. As your major fund, which is your general fund, as well as your non-major governmental funds, which is your food service, your debt service, and your capital projects. Total assets at the end of the year, $4.6 million in the general fund. Total liabilities, $7.5 million. $47,000 of deferred inflows of resources, and your fund balance or fund deficit at the end of the year of $2.9 million. And that's the general fund. And your governmental funds,
So, Brian, quick point,
yes,
so everybody's clear. In the spring, the school district submitted a plan to the state of Michigan. In that plan, I believe we outlined it at about $2.4 million, correct?
that is correct. It would have, in your original budget, yes, it would have been additional $300,000 less, so 2.6.
Okay,
In your final budget.
okay.
It was approved in June. Your non-major governmental funds, $436,000 in assets, $18,000 in liabilities, and a fund balance at the end of the year of $417,000. Again, that's your food service, debt service, and capital projects all together. If we go to the next slide, you have your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance as of June 30th, 2014. Again, broken down between your general fund and your non-major governmental funds. In the general fund, we have revenues of $15.4 million, expenditures $15.1 million. So you did have an increase in your fund balance this year of just under $300,000, bringing your original deficit at the beginning of the year of $3.2 million down to the 2.9, which I had mentioned on the previous slide.
So Brian, may I ask a quick question so everybody in the audience can hear?
Yes.
At a savings of $296,000, if we kept that pace, how long would it take us to pay off the debt?
It would take 10 more years,
10 more years.
because you're at 2.9 million and you saved just almost
Okay.
300,000.
And we'll come back to that because I want everybody to realize we submitted a plan in the spring that said we would be debt-free at 216, 217. And there's very clear language from the state of Michigan of us not meeting that goal. So I just want to, if we stayed with that, if we stayed with what we did last year, 300 grand, it would take 10 years.
That's correct.
Okay.
So that's your general fund. And your non-major governmental funds, 2.5 million in revenues, 2.5 million expenses, break even for the year, actually a decrease of only $5,000, bringing your fund balance at the end of the year down to the 417 that I had mentioned on the previous year. So really, $2.9 million deficit. Follow your deficit elimination plan. It's being revised currently.
Were you working with our former finance people when all that happened?
In the deficit elimination plan, I was not. No, we don't handle. We're the auditors. We come in and audit what is done, not prepare anything.
So just in case you haven't had a chance to read the website, we were projected to be at 2,585. That's what we sent to the state of Michigan. Our general fund is roughly $12 million. So to pay back $3 million or a little bit under 3, we have to have a savings of close to $6 million to get to zero at some point. That says we gotta save about 50% out of our general fund because we can't pay back debt out of grants, out of food service. Those are all restricted accounts, correct, Brian?
That's correct.
So again, we have a $12 million general fund. We're at about $3 million in debt. So that means somewhere we got a couple years to pay back the $3 million. And this year we saved 300, which would have took us 10 years. And we'll read a letter later because the state gave clear guidance of what would happen.
Okay. Then if we focus on the general fund, because that's your operational fund, this slide here is the general fund, and it's comparing your original budget, your final budget, and your actual at the end of the year. So your revenues were over budget, so that's good, of 0.7%, so pretty close, and your expenditures were over your final budget by about 3%. Again, pretty close, but you know, with a deficit district, you don't want to be over your budget in your expenditures. So final budget was an increase of $635,000, actually came in as an increase of just under $300,000. So about half of what you had originally, your final budget was in June.
So Brian, in your experience as an accountant working with school district, would it be unique that your enrollment could be going up and your deficit could be going up greater than your debt? So in other words, we picked up 113 kids last fall. So 700,
Actually 155 kids.
155, so roughly $1 million. And we, instead of drawing the budget down, we overspent the budget.
You overspent the expenditures.
That's a question we're gonna have to answer to the state of Michigan.
On the next slide, this compares your general fund revenues and expenses compared to last year. So last year, revenues, 13.2 million compared to current year of 15.4. So an increase of 2.2 million in revenues this year, or 16.1%. And again, as it was just mentioned, that's the 155 kids, the state aid at your foundation allowance, as well as some additional federal funding that you receive because of the additional kids in the district. Your expenditures went from 13.9 million up to 15.1. So your last year you had a decrease in fund balance of 660,000. This year had an increase of 300,000. So almost $1 million swing from 2013 to 2014 in your operations. So definitely moving in the right direction. However, needs to move a little faster. The next slide is a pie chart, and this is a breakdown of your revenues. You have your state, which is 77% of your funds, the feds, which is 11% of your funds, interdistrict, which is less than 1% of your funds, and then local, which is your property taxes, about 12% of your funds. So you receive about 89% of the dollars that come into the district from state and local sources, which is state aid and property taxes, for your foundation allowance. So that is all based on student counts. So the more students you get, the more revenue that comes into the district. And all these percentages very consistent with the prior year as a percentage of the total. Then if we look at the next slide, there's a breakdown of your expenditures in the same categories. So we had salaries of 48%, employee benefits 28%, purchase services 9%, supplies and materials of 8%, and other of 7%. So 76% of the dollars that go out of the district is salaries and benefits. So the money's coming in at about the same pace as it was in the previous year. You had more dollars, but coming in at the same rate or allocation, and going out at about the same rate or allocation. Very consistent with the prior year. Next slide is your general fund balance as a percentage of your expenditures. And you will see there's five. The bar chart has 5 bars on it. So it goes back to 2010. You were sitting at 3.2% fund balance. Then you went down to 6.3, down to 17, down to 23.2 in 2013, and then it did have an increase this year up to 19.4% deficit. Just to give you some guidelines as to where that should be, MDE, Michigan Department of Ed, does recommend a 15% minimum fund balance. Your peer group was just between 1,500 and 2,000 kids in the state as of June 30th, 2013, so that's the most current information that's out there right now. 11.5% fund balance. Statewide average is 8.3% fund balance, and the state, if you take out the big deficit of Detroit Public Schools, would go up to 9.4. So you want to get up to that 15%, but at least if you can get to the state average or to your peer group, you know, around 10%, 12%, that's definitely where you want to be, but you want to be above the 15 in the future. So that's the numbers. Any questions on the numbers before we move into the internal controls and the compliance? So first, your internal controls over your financial reporting. We found no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, but we did have a material non-compliance, and that was your deficit fund balance. That's a continuing comment that we had in the past, that we moved it to a material non-compliance this year because you weren't following your plan. You know, in the past, it was kind of, the plan was set in place and we're starting to follow it. It didn't happen this year, and we felt that was definitely material to bring to the board's attention. So update and follow the plan and moving forward. Then if we look at compliance, and this is over your major programs, this year we tested the nutrition cluster and the special education cluster. We found no material weaknesses and no significant deficiencies. However, under nutrition cluster, we had no findings at all, so that's wonderful. You're spending the money properly. Under the special education cluster, we did have one material non-compliance that we noted during the audit, and that was that no second semester payroll certifications were filled out that we could find. They just weren't available. We were unable to find them during the audit. All the other programs had payroll certifications filled out, but for some reason special educations were not in the same file folder as all the other ones. So that was a material non-compliance because you have to have payroll certifications twice a year.
Who was in charge of the special education cluster? Or who would have been responsible for that?
It would have been your management, it would have been, you know, obviously it comes down to the superintendent, but also your finance or the special education coordinator or director of special ed. Because those certifications have to be performed after the services are provided to the children and need to be signed off by either the teacher who's providing the services or their direct supervisor, which can prove that they were providing the services or can monitor that they were providing the services.
What's the consequence? What's the punitive damage that could be levied on the school district?
In the audit report, you will see in the single audit report, we did estimate it to be about $231,000, which is about half your, 50%, because half of them were not completed. However, talking with the ISD, this has happened in the past when there's been transition, documents weren't available, so they were hoping that there would be no punitive damages to the district, and that MD would understand that and move forward, allowing you to have those in the next year.
So we could end up with that amount as a deficit if the state tells us that?
If there are no payroll certifications, it's a question cost, and they could come back and request that money back. You are correct. Finally, the governance letter, and this is required communication between the auditors and those charged with governance. And I just wanted to point out in the governance letter, there is a new section in there this year that we added, and that was your accounting standards and regulatory updates. A lot of things happening at the state and with Michigan Department of Education, so we added this. And the biggest item, which I'll talk about on the next slide, which is GASB 68 and 71, which is the unfunded pension liability, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. But there were also 4 other matters for management's consideration that I wanted to bring to your attention, and that is first, document approval. And this is a repeat comment for the last couple of years, and that's that the bank recs and invoices need to be reviewed and signed off. So there needs to be an initial or some sort of sign off to prove that someone reviewed those bank reconciliations that were occurring.
Right.
Yes.
So for the board, if you recall, last year, I think in January or February, someone made a recommendation to hire somebody to prevent this from happening, and if I recall, you made a comment on last year's audit report on these same things. So we created or kept a position between $60,000 and $80,000 to prevent this from happening, and you're telling us and the board that that didn't get corrected.
That did not get corrected.
Thank you.
Adult meal prices was the next one, and your adult meal prices that you're charging, your food service meal price that you're charging to your adults that are eating is below the required minimum and needs to be increased. And that is based on a formula, based on the student price plus tax and commodities, and comes up to a number that needs to be, so we can work with management to make sure that gets up to the correct level. Next one is employee payouts. At the end of the year, there were some payouts to employees. There was missing supporting documentation for those payouts, as well as contracts that were unclear if the payout should have occurred in the first place.
So let me ask a question about that for a point of clarification. We have found evidence that people in fact have been paid out,
That's correct.
and you found no evidence or documentation that said those people were entitled to those payouts.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Then they were given money they shouldn't have had?
That would be the summation.
Huh?
Potentially. It's unclear in the contracts that it says they can accumulate time, but it doesn't say that they get it paid out at the end. It was just, the contracts were very unclear, and so we weren't able to support those payouts during the audit.
The board was clear on 5-1 in the resolution. Those payouts took place after that resolution. The board didn't rescind that resolution to, I believe, last board meeting where I was the superintendent. So therefore, any of those payouts would have exceeded anybody's authority at the time to have those payouts, because that matter was not brought to this board, nor was there any specific language in their contract that called for it.
Correct.
And because when Mr. Lang and Mr. Dempsey went down to the Department of Education when they had this deficit spending thing, we froze all spending when they come back from that meeting, and that there was nothing to be spent without prior board approval. So now they went ahead and did this without us approving it. That's wrong, right?
That's correct. That's why it's annual management comment.
Is there a specific listing in there?
Management would have that.
Yep. We have, for the board members, both Melissa and I both have the dollar amounts involved and the names involved.
Available tonight?
But that would take place in a closed meeting, in which we wouldn't discuss a personnel matter in open public.
And then finally, the final management comment, debt service fund, interfunds. There was some, as your property taxes come in, they come in from the township, and it tells what portion is debt and what portion is general fund. And the money that came in is deposited in the general fund, and then they make a transfer into the debt fund. That transfer didn't get made at the end of the year, and so that needs to be made and moved over there. And then in the future, as soon as that money comes in, it's two different bank accounts. So just move the money, because you get one check that has to be broken into two accounts. So you got to deposit in one, either write a check or make a transfer from one to the other.
What's that dollar amount, Brian?
At the end of the year, say it was, it would be on page 6-1 in the audit report.
233.
211,000.
So, just for everybody's clarity, we have two things that have to be cleared up. The previous administration received dollars that should have been put into an account. This year, we must pay the $211,000 back to the right account, transferred into the right account.
That's correct.
And the other thing that we're subjecting ourselves to, and we hope it doesn't happen, is another $230 punitive thing on top of our debt already.
For a special audit. Yeah.
Okay.
So last year we had 6 management comments, 4 were corrected, 2 were continued, as I mentioned, the deficit and the document approval, but then we added 3 new management comments this year, so bringing you back to 4. So, slight improvement from 6 to 4, but definitely needs to be improved.
I have another question for you. when we froze the thing, okay, did that give them the right to go ahead and use title money and everything else without coming to the board approval for the approval? Could they still go spend all that money without our approval?
I didn't read your resolution that all payments were froze?
Yes.
Well, then no. I mean, normally, it's in the budget, so you spend based on the Title I budget. You know, Title I's in and out, it's revenue and expenses. So it really nets to zero in your financial statements. It doesn't add to your fund balance or reduce your fund balance.
Because when we asked about it, we were told we had no control over how that money was spent.
Well, you always want to use all your Title I funds, because if you don't use it, you can only carry over 15%. So if, you know, you always want to use it all, I guess.
Well, yeah, but they still should have come to the board.
Agreed.
Okay.
So, and I can find it, just so everybody, I think what took place is, last year in the fall, and just to the best of my recollection, the board members and some people of the administrative team got called to Lansing because our numbers weren't correct in our debt from last year. And as anybody in this room knows, I'm sure the teachers and other members of Steel Union in BAPA, we had a week or something to redo the debt with wage concessions. When they came back on 5/1, there was a resolution adopted at the board level that said all spending has to come in front of the board. So whether the funds were there or not, they were asking for it to be brought in front of them to be approved prior to any spending or allocating any funds. And that if, without that permission, that you would be personally liable for those funds expended. So that's the resolution that the president is referring to. That was not lifted until this fall at our board meeting where they rescinded it.
So yes, I should have came to you with that. And then the last slide is what I mentioned, the cost sharing pension plan benefits, the estimated GASB 68 liability, which is out there. And this is a measurement as of September 30th, 2012. Would be 21 million. Your portion of the pension benefits would be $21 million. And next year during the audit, that will be recorded as a liability on the books of the district. And it's only a district-wide entry. Your full accrual statements, which we include all the buildings, all your debt, this would be an additional liability on your books next year. And, you know, it's a really big number, but you're still gonna, you know, it's a pay-as-you-go. You're paying in, you know, the state-required amount each payroll, you're paying it in. So a portion of what you're paying in is going to pay this unfunded liability. So it's not gonna affect your general fund at all, but it's something that's a really big number, and it's gonna, you know, affect a lot of districts because of that. And on top of that, there's an exposure draft out there with GASB that your OPEB, your post-employment benefits, so your health care to all your retirees, that they're looking to put as a liability on the district's books as well going forward. So that'll be probably 2, maybe 3 years down the road that we'll be talking about that a little more. So thank you for having me here tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Hill and Melissa and Christy and all their staff. We worked really hard to get the audit done, but they were able to provide us the majority of the information coming in, you know, after year end and trying to
And I would like to thank all you guys, because I know what a mess that was left in for you guys to try to figure out, and I know you've put a lot of hours trying to figure out how to undo all this mess. So I appreciate the extra effort that you put in.
And I just want to take a moment to publicly thank Brian and his staff, Ms. Cabine and Ms. Arnold, because this was originally scheduled for at the end of, the beginning of August, but when they came in and realized that we hadn't reconciled anything since February, there were several months where things hadn't got done. For Brian to come aboard and volunteer and help, and really thank you to Melissa and Christy for all the work that they've done to help get this done in time, because the due date is at the state,
November 15th.
November 15th.
And next year, that's October 15th.
October 15th. So I wanted to thank everybody for all their diligent work.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Huh?
Let me read this, please. Sorry. Just for everybody that hadn't had a chance to see this, it says, resolution effective May 1st, 2014. No employee of Bridgeport Spalding Community School District is authorized to expend or commit funds from the general fund or any other designated budget, such as at-risk funds for discretionary purchases without board approval. Discretionary items would be any item or service that requires a purchase order, other authorizing document, and/or a credit card for a vendor to provide or supply goods or services to the districts. If other means exist for authorizations for procurement of discretionary goods and services are to be considered within the scope of this resolution as well. Employees are to follow the standard order services request process as it is currently used. Submissions are due to be complied for board review by the business office. Requesters must provide rationale and other supporting document to justify the request. Cutoff for submission will be close of business Wednesday prior to the normal schedule. There will be no exceptions with regard to the minimum dollar that will be required to follow this process. This includes any and all faculty staff-run fundraisers. The only exemption to this resolution will be for emergencies when health, safety, or the welfare of students, faculty, staff, or buildings, property are at imminent risk, and failure to act could be deemed as negligent. Failure to comply with this resolution may result in personal responsibility for any or all incurred charges and discipline up to and including termination of employment. This resolution will remain in effect for the calendar year in which it's approved. The board reserves the right to revoke, modify this resolution at any time. That was adopted on May 1st.
Okay, Brucker Roof Discussion and Approval. The Buildings and Grounds Committee met with representatives of the Saginaw County Head Start and District Maintenance Supervisor, and the recommendation is to approve the upgrade to the Brucker building roof. I need a motion to approve the Brucker roof updates.
I move.
I need support.
On.
Moved by Dempsey, supported by Jay. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Let's see, I want to start with Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Bruns,
Yes.
and Mrs. Sageman.
Yes. We're gonna table the minutes.
Yeah, you can take it.
Okay, we did not receive the minutes in our packet, so I need a motion to table the minutes until the next meeting.
So moved.
I need support. Moved by Bob, supported by Larry, to table the reading of the minutes, approval of the minutes till the next meeting. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Bruns,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
and Mrs. Sageman.
Yes. Staff and student of the month recognition.
Thank you, Matt. What we're going to do is go in order. One of the things that we wanted to do this year in working with the principals is highlight a staff member from each building each month and a student each month. So, Ms. Duran, Ms. Baker, Mr. Baker, and Mr. McCarthy, please step forward and introduce your staff of the month and your student of the month. Whoever wants to go first. Yeah.
So first, I want to acknowledge our staff member of the month. One thing that, I think a lot of people here realize, it might be kind of tough is to be patient with some of the financial things you heard and a lot of things that, we're going to talk about today. And this staff member has exemplified that big time. Treating students with respect, being patient, caring about kids, trying to meet them where they're at, getting to know them in order to teach them. So that staff member is Miss Bannister. Y'all want to clap? Now on to the student. So I can't lie, I had to get some recommendations since, I've only been here for a short amount of time. But when I met this individual, it was very obvious why this person was recommended to me, and we even had some funny things in common. So this particular student not only, is succeeding in the classroom, is achieving, she's on our POMS team, so she does, after-school activities, while also holding a job where she's working more hours than I think maybe she should, but that's great. And the reason I said we had something funny in common is when I grew up, we worked at the same place. So, Miss Deandra Roberson. Because this is actually what I thought was the coolest thing, and she could vouch for this, was even after our discussion, I informed her, you're going to be student of the month. She said, well, Mr. McCarthy, what about, and asked me about some changes that, are being made to the schedule. So I just thought that was super cool too, that, even at the young age of high school, she's still advocating for herself and learning that skill. It's going to help her a lot. So thank you.
Good evening. I am Mr. Stephen Baker. I'm the principal at Bridgeport Middle School, and our staff member of the month is Miss Vanessa Monroe. Monroe was nominated by a number of her coworkers for all the extra things that she does, including preparing phone calls, working with kids, and she stepped up this year, and when we needed a girls volleyball coach at the last minute, and coached girls volleyball at the middle school this year. So we'd like to thank Mrs. Monroe. And our student of the month at Bridgeport Middle School, I have not seen him tonight in this sea of
He's here.
people.
He's here.
Is he?
Yeah.
Anthony Savage.
Yeah.
Anthony is a very respectful young man that puts a lot of work and hard work into everything that he does. He's not only respectful to the adults in the building, but he's also very helpful to his fellow classmates as well. So he epitomizes everything we value in our students at Bridgeport Middle School. So thank you very much, Anthony.
Hello everyone, I'm Susan Duran. I'm the elementary principal at Atkins. And for our teacher of the month, I've nominated Alyssa Jackson. She epitomizes hard work, student achievement, and just a lot of all-around effort to raise achievement for all students. And I'm not seeing Actually, it's really hard to choose, as we all have lots on our plates and lots of hard work that we're doing. So Ms. Jackson was just the first of many to come. So thank you for all your work, Ms. Jackson. And I'm not sure if either of I had, like I said, it was really hard to choose just one person. So I had chosen, the teachers had chosen several students, and for Student of the Month to be presented here, we have Joe Green and Carl Kellogg. But I've not seen them, and I'll invite them back to the next.
So at this time, Madam President, I'm requesting that the board recognize and issue certificates of recognition to both our student and staff of the month. Yes. So first we have Emily Zisler, and Ms. Slaughter are both our board reps for this school year, so we want to welcome them, and we're honored to have them, and this is something that we look to continue in the future. Just real briefly, Madam President, one of the things I think that we all need to recognize, I think sometimes in a moment of difficulty, and we try to redefine our purpose, there's a lot of good things taking place in our district, and each month we want to highlight some of those. So we're going to look to increase our student and staff recognition each month. So once again, thanks to the students and the staff that we recognize this month.
Okay, special education update, Mr. Chapman.
If the rest of this goes that well. Good evening. Just a quick update on two particular things that we've been working on in special ed. Number one would be the intensive monitoring process that we're going through with the Department of Special Education from Michigan Department of Education.
You need to talk a little louder.
I'm sorry. Is that better? No? Yes?
Well, the people behind you can't hear.
Okay. Because I can talk a little louder, I just don't want to shout at people either. So just a brief history lesson. For the past 9 years, Bridgeport schools have been monitored by the Department of Education in the area of special education for a variety of reasons. Some of those reasons have been just the basic things that we make mistakes on, whether it's data entry or following timelines, having signatures in the right place, providing the right notification for things. An example, not specific to us, but an example of the kind of monitoring that you would go through is if a speech and language pathologist discharged the child and didn't have the proper paperwork in order. So the process was good, it was well intended, but we just missed a piece of paper somewhere along the way. But those are accountability things that we need to be mindful of. So for 9 years running, we've been focus monitored in the Bridgeport schools. And basically what focus monitoring is just a review of data that we submit, the school district submits to the state, and they review it. And each year, the Office of Special Education, based on what their guidance is from the federal government, has priorities. Some years, those are just general priorities that they look at. The paperwork things, do we do things in a timely manner? Do we account for everything the right way? And at other times, they have priorities that they want to look at. About 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of that focus fell on transition age students, 16 and older, where we were preparing them for decisions they wanted to make about what they were going to do after they graduated from high school. Most recently, the focus has been on disproportionality and discipline with students. That's been about 4 or 5 years running, and the Bridgeport schools have been a part of that for 5 years now. Going back 5 years, we've been focus monitored because it appears that we are, in fact, suspending students of minority with IEPs at a higher rate than what their proportionate number of students enrolled is. So if we have 40% of our enrollment is a minority, we should be theoretically suspending 40% of the children with IEPs at that rate. We've been higher than that. One thing to remember is that data that we looked at this year is a year old because it's based on the previous year's data. Beginning with the end of last school year, so going back 2 years, we corrected that. We're no longer being monitored because we were disproportionate in our suspensions, but we ran into another issue. And what we found out is that we are discrepantly removing our children from school. And what that means for the Department of Education is that students with IEPs that are minority students are being removed from school for 10 days or greater at a higher rate than what they should be, based on the data from across the state. So one of the things that the state looks at is our kids who are in a minority subgroup with IEPs being suspended greater than 3.6% of the population of your school. So if we had 100 special ed kids, if we suspended more than 3.5, 4 students, above and beyond 10 days. And because every school district is different, you have a little bit of wiggle room in that, and 5% of total suspensions for special ed kids is one of the things that triggers that monitoring process. We've been there. For Bridgeport, in the 2012-2013 school year, we suspended 10.7 of our kids with IEPs for a period of greater than 10 days. That could be just for 3-day suspensions, all the way up to recommendations for expulsion or remove to interim alternative placements for up to 45 days. But 10.7% of our kids were out for greater than 10 days with IEPs. Of all the students that we suspended with IEPs, 2 groups were over that 5% threshold. One being our black students, and our white students were also suspended above that rate. Not a minority, but they were at 22%. Black students were at 75%. Our Hispanic population was actually lower than what our proportionate share of students enrolled would be. So another trend that was outlined in this process of reviewing our data and going back and looking at our discipline procedures was that in 2012 and 2013, district-wide, we had 1,865 referrals. In the 2013-2014 school year, we had over 9,000 referrals for discipline, and that's across all 4 buildings.
Can you repeat that?
Yes. In 2012-2013 school year, 1,865 referrals district-wide. And for last school year, the 2013-2014 school year, we had 9,034 referrals. Wow. And that resulted in 1,263 individual suspensions. Now, one of the things that I think it's important to recognize in this process, when we were identified last spring and April that we were going to be monitored intensively, that the Department of Ed, led by the Office of Special Education, came into the district, and one of the things they said to us was, we're here as the Office of Special Education, but we're now looking at discipline across the board. We're going to look at every referral and every suspension that the district has, because they felt they had an obligation to review all of our data. So those 1,200 suspensions weren't just special ed kids, because now we've opened up another door and started looking at discipline district-wide. So one of the things to note is that African American students are only 40% of our population, roughly. They were receiving 2/3 of the referrals in the district, about 65% of the referrals during that time period, and accounted for about 69% of the suspensions.
So, Mr. Chapman, if I woke up this morning and I was a person of color, what was my risk factor of getting suspended before I even walked in the door?
About 8 times greater.
So 8 times greater than anybody else.
Mr. Chapman, were you aware that I was sent 3 letters from the Department of Education the summer that I had a sign acknowledging 3 specific kids?
This past summer?
In August, I had to sign those letters, and they had to be sent back to the state that I acknowledged that these 3 kids...
This process was going on.
Huh?
This process was going on for 3 specific kids.
I don't know, all I know, Robin, do you remember? Huh?
Compensatory, yes, I was aware of that.
It was in response, right, it was in response to a complaint. He didn't specify 3 specific kids.
But we as a board have never been involved before, so I was shocked to have to sign the letter.
Well, one of the mandatory requirements of this particular process, when you are focus monitored, it's strongly recommended that there's a presentation to the board that outlines that. It's not a mandate from the Department of Special Ed. I hear that it's going to be in the future as part of a new rules package that hopefully will be approved this fall. That will be one of the requirements. When you become a district that's going through intensive monitoring, it's a requirement that the board be notified. So what this looks like for us is on the 3rd Thursday of every month, we hold a meeting. Typically we hold it at the high school because the space is better there in the boardroom. All of the voting principals, Mr. Hill, myself, Erin Sinkowski, who is the Saginaw ISD Assistant Director for Special Education. She does the monitoring process for the ISD. And Charles Thomas, who's a representative of the Office of Special Education, and Bob Dedeker, who also represents Office of Special Education, come, and we get together. And there's a couple of things that we do. Number one, we review our data from not only last year, but how are we faring moving forward now that we've recognized that we have an issue in that area. Our last meeting was on the 24th, so last Friday. We had to make an adjustment to the schedule and do a meeting on Friday. The next one will be on the 20th of November, and they fall on that third Thursday every month. A couple of the things that we do during those meetings is we step back as a group and we look at our data, and we look at the data from previous years to identify trends. We're looking for patterns and disciplinary actions and patterns for what the referrals were for. One of the things that we found was that fewer than 1% of all these referrals were for fights. And when we go back into that data a little further and we look at the referrals that were written up for fights, sometimes weren't actually fights, so there's a lot of misidentification of behavior. And we've also found that even among specific people, that as a teacher or an administrator, I may write a referral today that says one thing, horseplay, for instance, for something the student does, but 3 days later, a very similar action becomes endangerment or something different that, by guidelines holds a different consequence. So we're looking at those things to make sure that we clean up how we do things so that we're consistent across the board as well, which hopefully would lead to some consistency in the way we handle discipline issues. We talk about a lot of different ways to develop strategies and address the discrepancies. And we're going to look to districts that are similar to us in makeup and size to see the things that they're doing. If they're on the list, how can we work collaboratively with them to make sure that we're all heading in the same direction? If they're doing things better than we are, what are they doing differently so that we can address those issues and not really have to reinvent the wheel, but look to advice from other people on how to handle certain situations. One of the things that we've done and we're working on implementing is developing administrative monitoring activities. They've implemented some of those in the high school over the past few weeks. Since Mr. McCarty's come on, I know that Mr. Baker and Mr. Rand are also doing some things a little differently to monitor the discipline and the referrals that are coming into the office and how that data gets actually entered into computer systems that gets subsequently forwarded onto the state. And we're looking at doing some things for professional development opportunities for staff. And the other thing that we're looking to do is review and rewrite or make adjustments to written guidelines for addressing discipline with special education students, and then also our district and building guidelines for discipline procedures as a whole. To date, going back to October 20th, from last year to this year, we've had a significant reduction in disciplinary referrals in the district from teachers and administrative staff. We've also had a reduction in suspensions district-wide. And as you go back through that data, those referrals and suspensions are for much more significant things. A lot of the nuisance behavior has not been written up into disciplinary actions. It's for things like fighting and aggressive behavior, those types of activities. And I think a couple of the things that at our last meeting we sat down to try to figure out why is that happening. Some of those reductions I think can be attributed to a change in attitude in the district among administration and teachers. And also some new strategies that are being implemented, much heavier emphasis on after-school detentions, a focus on the possibility of possibly some Saturday school and things like that. So taking a different avenue to addressing student disciplinary issues. So really that's the brief update of where we are. I'd like to come back after each one of our monitoring visits to talk a little bit more about where we are in the process and share the information, because I think the way that we get better is to be very open in our discussion about the issue we have to address and be very honest with people about it. So if you have any questions, I may not be able to answer them now. I'll certainly get that answer back to you within a day or so.
You said from October until now, that number's significantly down.
I'm sorry, I might have misspoke. From the beginning of the school year to October 20th is when I made the cutoff for our last meeting, which was on the 24th.
Any idea if you did the math and figured that out, would it be what's significantly less than what was it, 9,800 referrals?
I didn't expand that out to see what we're on track to do. Trying to get back to my.
Moving forward, though, we can have an update like that?
Yes.
Month to month?
I think,
of
yes.
Referrals, and then try to get that out?
Yes.
Mr. Chapman,
Yes, sir.
what happens if we don't correct?
If we don't correct this, by the end of this school year, if we don't show a significant effort on our part to review our policy and make some changes to the way we do things, and we also don't show a decrease in the number of suspensions, and the referrals, it doesn't matter how many referrals we have, it's really a focus on those suspensions over 10 days out of school. There would be some funding withheld from the Department of Education, the Office of Special Education. They wouldn't withhold that money, they'd explain to us how we need to spend that money on professional development and some learning opportunities to ensure that down the road this problem gets addressed. So we're better to do it this way than have that rather large amount of money taken out of our budget and withheld for us to do specific activities with.
So a couple points of clarity, we would take general ed funds,
Correct.
set them aside for the sole purpose we have to stop spending in special education,
Correct.
and we're already $3 million in debt.
Yes.
Okay. We went from 1858 last school year,
2 school years ago.
2 school years, to last year, we went up 7,500 referrals. Less than 1% were from fights.
Correct.
This school year, from the start of the school year to October 20th, referrals were down
Correct.
from this same point last year.
Correct.
So we're correcting it from the beginning of this school year to October 20th.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have just, in my notes, just one more brief slide. I wanted to let the board know that forthcoming, I'll have some information regarding our instructional model in special education. We're looking at changing some of the ideas and the ways that we approach educating special education students, particularly at the secondary level, 6 through 12. There's some very early discussions going on in that area. Generally speaking, they're in the brainstorming phase, they're in the idea phase, so it wouldn't be fair to share any of that publicly right now, but I'd be happy to sit down with people and talk about what some of the ideas are. And really, we're just looking to improve, more effectively use our teaching staff, possibly redeploy some of our paraprofessional staff so that we're meeting students' needs in a better way and addressing those needs and making sure that we're being financially responsible with our staff members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Martin G. Atkins, elementary update, Mrs. Ryan.
Mr. Bates is going to assist me. We have to do quarterly updates, and this is the first of an update. We'll be coming back for 3 more. It's a priority status update. In the 2013-2014 testing cycle, we scored at a 4% statewide percentile ranking, which put Atkins Elementary in priority status. The 4-year top to bottom scores for the 3 previous years, including, and then last year, are shown here. And again here. In the 2010-2011 year, we started at in the 21st percentile, and then we went to the next year to 15, 11, and this last year we were at the 4 percentile. And what that says is that we're in the bottom 5% of all Michigan schools. And based on the ranking methodology, there's a system that they use to figure that out, and basically you have to have 2 years of data with 30 or more students to be considered. As a priority school ranking, which is based on a 4th percentile score, we are to implement a 4-year intervention model from the models that we had to choose from, which would be turnaround, transformation, restart, or school closure. We chose transformation model. The reason that we chose the transformation model is the Atkins transformational redesign model was chosen based on the readiness of the Atkins elementary staff to engage in the changes needed to increase student achievement. The design is currently underway with student academic growth as the goal. In order to get off the priority status, we have to make proficiency growth. We have to set targets, and we have to target some of the subgroups, and we have to focus on our bottom 30% students. That means the bottom, the 30% of students who are scoring not in the proficient range. That would be level 3 and 4 on our meet. The transformational writing team is a diverse mixture. It includes myself, Veronica Schlosser, Debbie Johnson, Teresa Rose, Rachel Kane, Carol Selby, and Regina Sylvie. Currently, the priority team has developed 3 big ideas to base the rest of the plan on. That is a state mandate. The reason that we choose those is to drive the rest of the plan. Well, the big ideas were developed with the collaborative learning cycle data dialogues, which means that we use the last 5 years of MEET proficiency data to take a look at them. The big ideas are aligned for rapid improvements. This is not an incremental growth model. This is a rapid turnaround model to improve our student achievement. Currently, we have 3 big ideas. Big idea 1, students' academic performance will improve through the systematic development of teachers' knowledge and skills. Big idea 2, students' academic performance will improve through the newly envisioned data-driven instructional program that applies instructional best practices to the right students at the right time in their learning journey using a professional learning community model. Big idea 3, students' academic performance will improve through the sustained implementation of a focus on culture and climate with the basis as higher levels of expectations for student learning and behavior and increased levels of parents engaged in their students' learning, which is parental engagement. The instructional plan is the next step. For our next update, we will have more. Currently, we have the 3 big ideas that are going to drive the rest of the plan. And the last part of my priority update is for more information, anyone can go to this website to find any and all of the data and the priority status information that they need.
Is there any questions?
Mr. Ray, I'll help you with this one.
Okay.
Let me just take a moment for everybody. There are 4 intervention models that a priority school can select from the reform plan. This was identified by the U.S. Department of Education. 1, closed model. Districts will close the school. Restart. Districts will close the school and reopen under a charter. Turnaround or transformation. We selected transformation. Districts will address 4 specific areas, developing teacher and school leader effectiveness, which includes replacing the principal who led the school prior to commencement of the transformation model. That's the state of Michigan. That's the requirement. There's no opt-out. The turnaround model. This would address similar issues to those mentioned above, which would include replacing the principal and at least 50% of the staff. So in actuality, Ms. Duran and the team had really two choices. They could pick transformation or turnaround. They made a recommendation for transformational. The district selected that. But again, I want to remind everybody, this included replacing the principal who led the school prior to commencement. That's adopted by the U.S. Department of Education.
That's correct.
How does a school exit priority status? From the school to exit priority status, and I need to remind everybody, the high school is in priority status as we speak. You must meet all interim measurements of progress from the priority schools. That includes the leading and lagging indicators, meet proficiency or improve targets on school average, increase the proficiency rate of all traditional subgroups, increase the proficiency rate of all the various low-performing students. Schools designated as priority schools must either make aggressive proficiency targets or demonstrate significant improvement by the close of the third year. Remember, the high school is under the school Office of the School Reform. So at any time the Department of Ed does not deem the high school's made significant progress, they have the right to come in and place it under the EAA. The union, we all signed off this afternoon in a meeting. I showed Mr. Brown what the elementary one will look like briefly. Part of the plan is that him and I both signed a document. That means that Atkins Elementary will be under the same thing. You're under the Office of School Reform until they give you a letter saying you're not. It's not an automatic, we're off in 3 years. You're under there until they tell you you're not. And by the way, you do not want to get re-identified, because if you do, you cannot select the same model. So even though you don't see the high school identified on this year's list, we're still in priority status. We get monitoring from the Department of Ed.
Good evening again. I'm here to present the Bridgeport Middle School's scorecard for the 2013-2014 school year. This scorecard actually replaces the previous Met AYP did not meet AYP system. The new scorecards are color-coded with 5 different color coding designations: dark green, lime green, yellow, orange, and red. The color coding designations are dark green are schools that score 85% of the points or greater with no individual red cells or components. The lime green is 70% or greater but less than 85 with no individual red cell and components. That's an important part of our score right there. Yellow is 60% or greater but less than 70 and or a few red cell components. Orange is 50% or greater but less than 60, and red is less than 50%. The components that were referred to earlier, they're either target met or target not met, so they're either green or they're red. Cell and components are based on different achievement in different areas of identifiable groups of students. Say, for example, it might be all students math proficiency, African American student math proficiency, students with disability reading proficiency or science proficiencies, things like that. Also, we also receive points for compliancy and other educational factors such as graduation rates, attendance, and other teacher evaluation pieces, things like that. This is an actual copy of our Bridgeport Middle School scorecard for this school year. You'll see that we have numerous green cells where we met our goal, where we met our target, and then we have red cells as well where we did not meet our target. There are a couple individual yellow cells which are where we partially met our target, and those are where we have students with disabilities in math and reading. So you can see from our scorecard, we have some areas of need, and we also have some areas where we have met our score, where we've met our targeted area. These are just breakdowns. You can see down on the upper side, it'll go over math, reading, social studies, science, writing, and then across down the left side, it's all students, bottom 30%, African American students, Hispanic, Caucasian, economically disadvantaged, and then students with disabilities. The other factors involved in obtaining our final score are the attendance rate, which our score, we received a green mark on, we met our target. Educator evaluations, we also received green on that, and compliancy factors, we also received green on those three pieces. It just messed up and it's covering up a letter, but I'll ad-lib. Bridgeport Middle School earned 50 out of a total of 66 points for 76%, which would typically put us in that lime green area, but because of our red cells, it actually defaults us down to yellow, where we're 60% or greater, but less than 70%, and or a few of those red cell components, which I showed you on the two slides ago. Bridgeport Middle School has been working on certain aspects to improve our educational product. We're at the current time, we're continuing our 7-period schedule with intervention and enrichment classes. We have, in the last couple of years, increased our contact time with students in the area of EL, English Language Arts. That's the reading and writing components, with additional reading and writing classes available to the students to increase the contact time with our students in that area. This year, we've done some professional development in the area of math, and we're going to be incorporating that math professional development into our classrooms on a daily basis. We have exploratory classes that are utilizing adaptive technology and mastery of assessments, and that's relatively new in the last year. We are going to continue to maintain a promotion policy, which we feel has assisted us in getting students to perform for our school. We are utilizing and collecting student data, not only for pre and post testing, but also evaluating things like NWEA data and things like that. And we're going to continue to use after-school tutoring and summer school credit recovery type programs to make sure that our students are fulfilling their educational obligations. And that's my presentation.
You have to bear with me, it makes me nervous with my back to everybody. So I'm going to stand over here so everybody can see as well. What I want to do is a lot of what you just saw. I'm really excited to be on board, and I really thank Superintendent Hill and the board for giving me this opportunity. I know we're going to move forward, and at the same time, I think we need to have an honest discussion here on just where we're at, so we all have an understanding of where we're at before we can move forward. So, there was a report in one of the papers that said that we are in our first year as a priority school along with the elementary school, and that's not accurate. Okay, we were identified based on the 2010-11 data. All right, so since that time, the high school has been a priority school. And that's why you'll see as you look at some of this data, you know, all the years aren't there, but what's really important to me and really striking to me is that, you know, you look at the state averages, which both last year and in 10-11, you know, were below, but the important thing, you know, for me to recognize and take away here is that that data in 10-11 that got us on the priority list, last year we did considerably worse. And that's what you're going to see is a gradual decline in test scores since we were made a priority school. Obviously that needs to change because you heard some of the options that are out there if we don't improve. So you can see in English we made small gains on our ACT average. But everywhere else, from the year that we were identified to last year's scores, there's been a decrease. Yes, thank you. So this is the state assessment that in addition to the ACT, we are, our students take, and that's where that number comes from, the top to bottom ranking, which last year we were in the 10th percentile. And it's the same thing. So you can see less than 10%. The state doesn't really publish anything lower than that. It doesn't say 1%, 3%. It'll just give you a less than. So you can see here, not only, unfortunately, below the state proficiency. So this is we're not talking advanced levels here. This is proficient in each of these subjects. You can see in 10-11 is what landed us on the priority list. Last year we did worse. Graduation rates. You can see the state of Michigan's average there for those years. Bridgeport High School's percentage, this is the 4-year cohort, as well as the average for special education in addition to our special education graduation percentages. So you can see since 2008, 2009, there's been with one exception, a progressive decrease in our graduation rate. Also, while the special ed is somewhere near or even a little better in most of those years to the state average, certainly none of us would agree that 1 in every 2, a ballpark of there, should graduate on time. So that's not good enough. This I find particularly interesting. So here what you can see is a breakdown of, because the state looks at subgroups as well, as Mr. Chapman was kind of alluding to with discipline. So here's our percentage of African American students and white students, which are our 2 largest groups. And you can see their graduation percentages. What I find interesting and just confusing, I guess would be a better word for it, is that our African American students are graduating, mostly. That's not what I found confusing, I promise that. That's good, that's a good thing. What I do find confusing is the suspension data that you heard. I find it very difficult to understand why a significantly larger population of African American students were being suspended and getting referrals written for when, by the data that I could see, they were doing what they had to do. So, this is where the applause, I hope, stops. This is not good, and this is serious. Okay, this is the struggle that we're dealing with right now. This is from last year. 50% of 9th grade students failed 2 or more classes. We're calling kids seniors and juniors and sophomores that are not seniors and juniors and sophomores. Currently, 31 out of 116 of our seniors are not on track to graduate. It doesn't mean they're not going to graduate. Okay, but they are currently, if nothing changed, and they took their 7-period schedule and passed all of those classes, are not on track to graduate. So this is where we're at right now. But it's not all bad. We got solutions. You heard what Mr. Chapman said, that the state mandates of us, and even if they didn't, it's just what we believe to be true, that we need to keep students in class and in school. Those suspension rates that you heard are shocking. They're far too high. And what I can tell you is that this year, at least since I've been here, that the staff, that the teachers are doing a great job of working with us. And we are incorporating different interventions, both in the classroom, increasing family contact when there are some problematic behaviors, and also putting some different things, like you said, in place to prevent suspension. So it's a challenge for teachers to keep kids in the class. It's a challenge for administration to keep kids in school, but it's what we have to do. There's some additional things here. There was this area called the Bearcat Center, which in my assessment, and this is not necessarily in writing, just from kind of communicating with people, where a significantly large number of students would go when they were removed from class. And I've heard estimates of anywhere all the way up to maybe 50 students sometimes, or in this location. We need them with their teachers. We're moving to a 4-quarter grading system so that parents are more aware, so that the semester doesn't just end and then the kid has an F and they have no chance to intervene. So we'll have a first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. So at the end of this first quarter coming up, the families will have an idea. They'll know for sure what 40% of their students' grade is going to be. I just think that awareness will allow them to get more involved, reach out to myself, counselors, teachers, so that we can work together for that next 40 and make sure we're prepared for the final. There was this thing called May term. Most of you are probably familiar with May term. We've discontinued that. In some of the things that I've seen, some of there was documentation for this, so keep in mind those assessment scores that were decreasing at too rapid of a rate. Yet we were offering classes like card play. We were offering classes on different cultures, on board games. So we were doing these things, and seniors who had met the minimum requirements of graduation, to my understanding, were pretty much turned loose. It's my assessment that that's not preparing them for the next level. Also, what we're doing here, incorporating strategies from the priority plan. So, that there is a set plan that's developed into core classes during 7th period. Previously, 7th period may not have had some of these core classes, but you just saw the data of how many kids are not on track to graduate. Certainly, I think we would need our core classes and to incorporate the strategies into those classes. I'm proud to say we have a counseling department. Last year, it's my understanding, there was not a counselor, and that position was moved elsewhere, or whatever it was, there was no counselor. Clearly, that's something we need with this data. We need parents to have that go-to point of contact. We're encouraging and supporting student-centered classrooms. We are developing a process for students in need of an academic, behavior, or social intervention to be identified and then supported. That's in the works, in process. And as you heard from Mr. Chapman, we're restructuring the use of special ed teachers.
Very impressed with their ideas and the things they're coming up with, and I hope they keep up the good work.
If any clarification, I want to make sure I still got a job. It's McCarthy, so I hope Mr. McCarthy was appointed.
Okay, for public participation, if there are citizens in the audience who wish to be recognized by the Board of Education for the purpose of making a statement or asking a question, this is the appropriate place on the agenda. Citizens should fill out a public input card and give it to the board president prior to the starting of the meeting. Please stand, state your name, and proceed with your statement or question. No response will be given at this time, but will be given in writing at a later date if necessary. This is not a time for making complaints about employees. Employees' complaints should be going to the administration in writing. If you mention these employees by name, it can constitute a lawsuit against you, so please don't say names when you're up here talking. Okay, the first one, and there will be a 3-minute limitation. Stand up here, give us your name and address, and state your concerns. Veronica Tucker. Bob, do you want these to write on? Yes, please. Pass that over, Bob.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out in support of the community. Mr. McCarthy, thank you for your wonderful presentation. I answered a lot of my questions I had. I'm looking for wonderful things from you. Board of Education, Superintendent, I'm a little taken aback by some of the comments tonight, so bear with me. I was a little, I've been in this community for 30+ years. I graduated in '92. I've always had a vested interest in the kids' education. As a parent of 3, 2 at the high school, 1 at the elementary, I'm disappointed. I've been here all my life, and to see what has come about, it's disappointing. So I have questions that I want answered. Our students have had their schedules changed multiple times. When you go to the teachers and you ask what's going on, they don't have a lot of answers. Mr. McCarthy, you're just coming into this role. You don't have a lot of answers yourself. Stuff was happening. Teachers were getting fired, coming back, getting fired, coming back. You know, it goes on and on. You know, we got substitutes who are quitting. I'm just a little flustered about it all. Because of this, learning isn't happening. My son has a learning disability. His schedule's been changed 3 times, going to be 4. How do you think he's been impacted by this? I just want to know, our schedule's going to continue to be changed? I need an answer. Are they going to be unplanned? There are many students that are still completing credit recovery from previous years. My son is in an E-2020 class. A month and a half into the school year, he still didn't get anything as far as a login to complete that. You guys you're not following up. You should be following up with the administrators. Wonderful people. I mean, another issue. I mean, Skyward. Love the tool. Wish it worked. It doesn't what's going on with this tool? Why am I not getting the right information? I can't tell if my son's missing an assignment. I asked my son, he says he turns it in. They weren't either trained on it or it's an IT issue. Something that you guys need to look into. I mean, I could go on and on. There's things I could go on and on, but the issue at hand here is our children's education and where we go from here. I've heard wonderful ideas. It's great. I'm excited about it. But as a parent and having an invested interest in this community and my kids, that's why I'm taking a step to run, to be on this board. Myself, Amanda Adams, Melissa Miller, and Judy Young.
Well, following Veronica is going to be a little tough. But collectively as parents, I feel that the board is not welcoming the chance for us to be a part of you. Collectively as parents, you need parents on the board that have common interests in this entire community. Look at everybody here. Look at all of you. This is a sign that something's not right, correct? Yes. Absolutely. The only answers that I've heard to some of the questions and to some of the media, and I know some of that can get blown out of proportion, I totally respect your positions on that answering. The only thing that I've seen is blame on other people. When we do not have the administration in place to take that spot, whose responsibility is it? Our Board of Education. Who is stepping up and being proactive instead of being reactive to every situation that happens? When there is an issue, you need to be proactive. I have never seen this many people at a board meeting in my 30 years here in this district. Never. This speaks louder than what anybody has done. We need people on the board that are proactive. Us mothers are trying to get up there because we are trying to be a voice. We are trying to be proactive. Changes need to be made because our children are suffering. It's not just my children, it's their children. Look at this. Look at everybody here. Your staff is crying out. Your staff on a daily basis is struggling to do the things they need to do to educate our children. And as parents, we are stepping up and we're saying, look, these are the issues, please address us. And nothing's being answered. Something needs to be done, and if it's not, we're going to lose. Our children are suffering, they are begging. The protest didn't happen. That protest was our students standing up for the right to get an education, because they are not. And that's all I have to say.
Good evening. Sorry about that. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Thomas White staff. I've been asked to address the board with concerns that we have in our building. Our students are missing out on key components of the educational system that was in place last year. As most of you already know, our award-winning BST program is now gone, and the people who ran it. This program taught our students and helped them to understand behaviors expected in the building. We had a refocus room in place for students who had difficulty throughout the day and was a place for them to gather themselves and most times head back to class focused and ready to learn. Whether it was behavior related or another factor that caused the behavior, they did well with the timeout place and were able to stay in school instead of being sent home. The the building also lost 2 intervention specialists that worked with students who needed extra attention in reading and math. With these educators in place, students could maintain grade level expectations with their support. This is a very crucial place for our students to stay on the mark, as next year they will be part of the Atkins Family Priority School. We need these students meeting standard when they enter Atkins next year. Our intervention specialists also took on the character education component of the building, which is one more thing being put back on the teachers. Teachers are missing a common planning period with sharing teachers and also having one less PE teacher. Scheduling has forced us to move music, art, and computer in the morning and gym in the afternoon. These young minds work best at staying on task in the morning, and now specials take up a 45-minute block of that time in the morning. I mean, as a staff member, I know that specials are something that the kids look forward to in the afternoon. We are doing the best that we can with these changes, but extra support is needed, especially in academic areas. Finally, our families have not had a chance to meet our new building administrator. Leadership has been in the building a few times since the year has begun. When teachers try to contact administration via phone or email, there is no response. I have been part of the BSCS family now for 17 years. I'm worried about my students, our students. I may not live in this district, but these kids are mine too. We all understand that we are facing a crisis. However, the change is not good for our kids. There does have to be change made. Plans are in place to deal with certain critical components affecting our district. Deterring from the game plan is just not good for these children. Thank you for your attention and allowing me to speak on behalf of my teacher colleagues. We know we must change some things. We need leadership. Thank you.
have the deficit elimination plan right here in my hands. It shows that we would be at $2.6 million as we heard tonight, and we're at 2.9, so we're $300,000 off. Next year, we'd be at 1.6 million, which is $1 million to the good. The year after that, 510,000 in the hole, 1.1 million improvement. And then the fourth year, $900,000 gain, and we'd be almost $500,000 up. To say that it would take 10 years at $300,000 a year is true, but that's not what's reflected in the plan. And this is with 104 teachers, with not cutting one single teacher from last year. We had 12 teachers leave over the summer, voluntarily. They weren't laid off, they weren't fired. 12 teachers accounts for a huge chunk of money. And that would be an even better cushion than the plan provided for. I have a PowerPoint all set up ready to go, but it's going to run longer than my 3 minutes. But when I heard what was said tonight, I'm on the negotiating team. I do the finances for the Bridgeport Education Association. And the plan says a gain of $1 million, 1.1, 900,000 with 104 teachers. So with 12 fewer teachers, that's 92. I don't see why we can't proceed on that basis. So if somebody else is going to speak tonight would use their time to show my presentation, I'd be happy to have that. Thank you.
Yes, those are my students. And I'm proud of all of them. I am Connie Curtis Brown. This is my 20th year here in the district. We, the school district, teachers, school board, the parents, are in the business of providing high-quality education to all of our students in this community. So far this year, that's been very difficult to do. The district has not provided our students with a positive learning environment. Mrs. Sageman said at the last board meeting that we had rough starts before and students without schedules on the first day, and that is true. That has happened. But this year has not been like the years of the past. In the past, students waited a day or two, classes were adjusted, students placed in the appropriate classes with reasonable class sizes. If overloads remained, they were very small, and teachers were fairly compensated per our contract. This year, schedules were not adjusted until 6 weeks into the school year. At the high school, we had classes of 70 plus. Students still at the 6th week of school. We had an art class of 60 until last week. Students are still being moved up until last week. This is not a rough start. This is prolonged chaos. Key academic supports were taken out of the schedule. The high school 7th hour enrichment classes are gone. Some have become core classes with shortened time and are interrupted for pep assemblies, half days, announcements. 7th hour was built into the schedule to provide our students with the opportunity to receive tutoring, assistance from their teachers, homework time, the opportunity to make up or retake tests without missing instruction. 7th hour also provided time to work with students on their educational development plans, to set goals and have a clear plan to reach them. The school-wide reading and writing strategy is no longer in place. To address our low achievement in reading comprehension, we put in place a reading and writing program in 7th hour, and now that is gone. Okay? The first year that we were on this plan, we had improvement in our reading scores. That was the year left out on the presentation. The 9th grade Bearcat Academy was to be reinstated this year. The 9th grade teachers had a great deal of success with increasing 9th grade achievement with this program. Last year's failure rates were higher than when the Bearcat Academy was in place. It was to be reinstated this year, but it was not. The Bearcat Pride and the Way to Be positive behavior sports have been taken away. We started these last year and had some success. We are actively making plans to adjust the programs to provide better incentives for our students. We've not had that opportunity. Double math classes for our 9th and 10th graders were taken out of the schedule without asking the rationale for it. It was to help address our very low math scores. This was also a program that had improvements planned to be in place this year. It's my understanding that some of it has been added back into the schedule. We now have 3 sections compared to the 10 sections of what we had last year. Why has it taken so long? Why did we take it out in the first place? From the beginning of the year, teachers were told at the high school.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
No.
Let her go. Let her continue.
No, it's 3 minutes.
Hello. I've lived in Bridgeport for the last 45 years. I graduated in 1987. Sorry, this is very emotional for me. Both of my kids have attended here since preschool. Whether it has been rumor, like you say, or not, what I believe that has happened since the school year started are sit-downs, fights every day, more than once a day, guns and knives brought to home games, lockdowns, GPA and credits considered non-important. People put in teachers positions that are not clueless over the curriculum. That are clueless, I'm sorry, I spoke. Even though some things have settled down since Mr. McCarthy has come aboard, the lack of communication and trust between the school board and our superintendent and the parents who entrusted our children with them is lacking. I have been talking to parents and listening to their concerns, which are a lot of my own. My daughter, a sophomore, is concerned over her grades, GPA, and getting into a good college. My son, a 5th grader who loves school, now hates it and thinks it is stupid. I have stressed to both my children the importance of school, grades, college, and good career. Things that were not stressed to me. I want them to do better than I did. As a school board, you are failing them and every other child who attends these schools and would like the same opportunities. Thank you.
My name is Kara Showerman, counselor at the high school. There have been numerous questions and concerns surrounding the scheduling of students this year. It is my intention to speak some truth on what has transpired. The normal procedure has been to create a tentative master schedule before the end of June and enter those courses in Skyward, or previously TIES. This year was no different. The tentative master schedule was created before leaving at the end of June with anticipated changes involving PE, Spanish, and electives. Students were to be scheduled upon staff's return at the beginning of August. Upon return, a copy of this tentative master schedule was emailed on August 5th to the superintendent's office. This was followed by numerous emails requesting clarification of the master schedule. Questions included whether or not we would keep accelerated classes, have a math supplement for 9th and 10th graders, if we would offer Spanish for 10th graders, if we were keeping our alternative programming, etc. On August 20th, I received a list of teachers who were left after 6 teachers were laid off in the building, and an entirely new master schedule had to be created. We also increased enrollment during this time by roughly 60 students at the high school. The decrease in staff resulted in a master schedule that was unrealistic and unmanageable. Teachers had class loads as high as 75 students, and teachers and students were overwhelmed and frustrated, to say the least. The demands placed upon staff created an environment where teachers were desperately trying to teach and students struggled to get an education. This frustration culminated on October 3rd when students did, in fact, stage a demonstration at the high school. I was there. In the interest of time, I cannot possibly speak to every communication, decision, and revision to the master schedule that has taken place. To date, I have counted at least 6 revisions to the master schedule, which have caused massive student schedule changes, last-minute teacher preparation, and in some cases a significant loss of instructional time due to the students moving to completely different courses. These changes have not originated with the guidance office staff. They certainly did not originate with the previous administration. In fact, not all changes have even been communicated to the guidance office. With the marking period coming to an end this Friday, we are still making schedule changes. The proof is in the pudding, and I have the pudding 2.5 months worth. I would be happy to sit down with any person on the school board and provide evidence of what has transpired this year, with the expectation that change is of extreme urgency. Our students deserve better, our staff deserves better, our parents deserve better, and our community deserves better. We cannot let one more day pass with our district in disarray. I look forward to speaking with you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amanda Adams. I have a 6th grader and a 4th grader in this school. I have also lived here for my whole life, which consists of 34 years. Never in my life can I remember have we ever had such chaos, mistrust, lack of communication on your part with the parents. Now, we had a lockdown on Wednesday due to an irate parent. You want to know how I found out about it? I found out about it through a text message from a different parent. 24 hours later, we got a message addressing the situation. And I'm supposed to trust my children with you? You are supposed to communicate and ensure with us that our kids are getting a proper education, are safe under your care, which they are not. I cannot trust my children with you. Thank you.
Lots of emotion in this room tonight, and I think it's just because we all care about our kids so much. I have seen changes in the many years I've taught here, but nothing like this year. We've had years when our classrooms have been overcrowded, as we've heard before, but it's always been rectified within 2 weeks. We know that the impact of numbers affects the quality of education. This year it's taken 6 weeks to solve this overcrowding problem, but I don't think it's always been done with the students' education in mind. The middle school, we're down 6 staff members from last year, and we've gained 1 teacher from those 6, So in order to schedule our classes with no overloads, our special education teachers now have to teach 3 exploratory classes. I understand that our special education classes, students don't qualify for science and social studies, but those classes have a lot of reading, and if they have a reading deficit, they need those special education teachers in the classroom to support with their I see these special education students just floundering, they don't know what to do, they don't have the support. We're trying the best that we can, but they need that extra little push, and when the special ed teachers are teaching 3 exploratories and only being with their special ed kids 2 hours a day, something's wrong with that picture. And I know that scheduling isn't an easy fix, but we can't say that if we have 20 teachers, we can service 600 students. It doesn't work that way. It's a lot more complicated. We've lost 6 weeks of consistent classes. And after teaching as long as I have, if you lose those first 6 weeks, it's really difficult to get your year back on track. At the middle school, we've had programs that were showing progress. We had separate writing and reading classes. We only had it for a year, so our test scores aren't going to reflect that, but we knew that if there was more time in writing, more time in reading, the test scores, we would hope, would go up. This year, that's been disbanded, so we don't know if it's going to work or not. Now the ELA teachers have to teach both reading and writing in 55-minute classes. Again, not the quality of education our students deserve. Another downside to scheduling with reduced staff is that grade level teachers at the middle school don't have common prep time. In 7th grade, we would meet with parents at least once a week, and parents could come in, meet with all the core teachers at one time. Now those parents have to schedule 4 different times. They have to give up 4 hours a day if they want to meet all 4 of the core teachers. Working closely with parents provides quality education for our students. This has been difficult again because of the changes made. In the past, we've had after-school tutoring programs. They were very successful for our students. They improved their grades, their attitudes about school. That's gone. Am I done? Okay, but don't forget about the BSD program because that discipline is a problem too.
President. I represent these teachers here who've had a pretty rough year. We've had a lot of chaos, we've had a lot of overloaded classes, we've had a lack of administrative support. A lot of these problems have been solved. We now have a good principal, we now have a discipline program that started. I think it's a good one. However, a lot of problems still exist. We don't have an academic learning environment that is as good as it should be. We have seniors who don't have enough classes offered in order to prepare them for the next step in their life. Many of them were so frustrated that they did sit down in the lobby there to make their needs known. As far as I know, these needs have not been met yet. They were angry about their schedules, their course offerings, their transcripts, the general chaos. That's what we're here for, is to provide a good education for these people. We must do better. At the other schools, we have had similar problems. Discipline is an issue, academic records are an issue, poor teaching assignments are an issue. We're having trouble getting substitute teachers now. We have to do better. We have to build a better system. We have to provide teachers with a productive teaching environment. We have to provide students with the necessary classes at the proper time. We have to provide them with an orderly, productive classroom environment. We have to do it for our students, our parents, and for our community. And if you have any questions, see me.
I'd like to say thank you all for coming. This is an awesome turnout.
Absolutely.
I'm here for one reason only. These kids need an education and they're not getting it. I can tell, Mr. Hill, that you're pretty perplexed by sitting up there watching your facial expressions as your teachers are expressing their concerns and you're cutting them off because you're saying that they're out of time. I understand that I only have 3 minutes up here, but I've got the rest of my life out there. That's right. I happen to be a very successful business owner in this community, and I am used to running a multi-million-dollar operation, and I understand the numbers. What I don't understand is what the heck happened to our kids' education.
Absolutely.
Numbers don't lie. Numbers are easy to see, you guys. I mean, I'm not a math whiz, but I understand numbers. But when you base your numbers based on averages, as one of the teachers said, Ms. Portis, I believe it was you, when you base it on averages, you can't use it. Mr. Hill, we talked about it on the phone. We talked for an hour and 9 minutes. We got nowhere. I believe I asked you probably 20 questions, and not one has been answered. You told me that you would respond to an email later that week, and it's been a week and 3 days, and I've yet to hear from it. So, that being said, I have decided to run for school board as well. Not as a politician, because I'm a political atheist, and I don't care about that. I don't care about Democratic views. I don't care about Republican views. What I care about is the view of this kid's education. All of these kids need an education. My daughter's a senior, and hopefully she better graduate this year. She is my last student at this school. My son graduated in 2006, but I care about not just her education. There's a lot of kids in this community that I care about. There's probably at least 6 of them in this room that would stand up and call me Dad. And one of them is on the board. Thank you all. For the record, she addressed me as Mr. Rhymes. It is Rhines, R-H-I-N-E-S. I said it because I believe I just had a reporter ask me how to spell my last name.
I'm the preschool teacher and program director. I'm also a former Bridgeport grad. I've been teaching in Bridgeport since 2012.
And I'm Katie Schoenig, and I am the other lead preschool teacher at Thomas White Elementary.
We are here to update you and inform you on our preschool program. As many of you know from the email that I sent out a few weeks ago to the school board about the additional preschool, I wanted to discuss this with you in person. Thomas White had an amazing opportunity to add an additional preschool classroom to our school. This is a very rare opportunity to add classrooms, as the Midland ESA does not offer additional slots. I was working closely with the Midland ESA, which is our preschool headquarters. Midland ESA assured me that no general funds would be used, only preschool funds for this additional classroom and staff. I sent many emails to the central office and administration. I was able to set up a meeting. During that meeting, I was able to explain the benefits of the additional preschool. The benefits would be more students attending our feeder program. About 86% of our preschool students attend kindergarten at Thomas White. Also a benefit would be additional money for transportation, janitorial staff salary, administration salary, and secretary salary come out of our budget. Our budget allows our funds to be used toward these salaries and expenses. This additional classroom would have brought an additional $120,000 to our school. Like I mentioned before, no general funds would have been used. Even the steelworkers' benefits would have came out of our budget. The second thing that I would like to address would be our preschool program almost shut down due to lack of communication with central office. Our preschool budget was due on October 17th. When I had the meeting about to discuss the additional preschool, I was told a specific staff member at central office was in charge of our budget. I offered to help on a Friday since that is our preschool workday. No preschoolers attend school on a Friday. But they told me that they don't work on Fridays. I suggested meeting after school. They never took me up on those offers. During the meeting, I copied all of my budget information and told them that I would email them with more information when I received it from the Midland ESA. I did send informational emails to this person several times from the middle of September until October 15th. When I had not heard anything from them, I called their office and left messages. On October 15th, 2 days before our budget was due, I received an email saying they could not locate our budget or the budget information. They could not, we frantically had to call and ask Midland for an extension. Midland gave us 1 week. If we did not complete that, then our program would be shut down. That next Monday, the 20th, I went to central office to help with the budget. It took 45 minutes to do it. Our preschool program is a grant-funded program through the Michigan Department of Ed. You can find the program is nearly in every low-income school district in the state of Michigan, and it is highly praised in the early childhood community. The program works with districts to provide quality preschool education to low-income and at-risk students to equip them with the necessary skills for their future school success. We have always been able to work collaboratively with the administration of this school district to ensure that our students receive the highest quality preschool experience. We want to continue this, but with the lack of communication between our staff and administration this year has caused huge difficulty. We understand that there is much more needs to be addressed as a priority school in the district. Our hope is that the current administration will help, with the help of our school boards, will strive to meet the educational needs of those students enrolled in our priority school without jeopardizing the quality of education for our youngest learners. Thank you.
My name is Jalen Vincent. I'm a junior at Bridgeport High School, and to say the least, this year has been the most hectic. Beginning with our physics class. We had a physics teacher maybe for a few weeks in September. Then nobody knew where she was, therefore leaving us with a sub. Now I'm saying that we've been with a sub and our physics teacher, as our physics teacher, not qualified to even teach us what's in the books or what's on the board, and it's been like this since maybe the second week of September. And my question to you is why? Why do we have, and so far we've went through 3 substitutes. We're on our 3rd substitute. And they're still not qualified to teach physics, and I'm still trying to wonder, why don't I have a set grade? Why don't we have a set teacher in order to teach us? And then on top of that, the end of the marking period is this Friday, and I still don't have a set grade in that class. And I hear about all this leadership up here. What are you doing with this leadership if we don't have a teacher in that spot? All this leadership should go towards finding us one of these core classes a teacher, so therefore we can graduate on time. Please. Like, that's all I'm asking for, is just for the administration to just find a teacher that's qualified enough to teach us and get us where we need to be in life, because this is one of our classes that we quote unquote need to graduate to be on the trend, to be on the correct road in life. But with all this administration have all this power in their hands, why aren't y'all putting it in the right places?
My name is Alan Morford. I live in the district. I I've been here for 17 years, and my remarks are contained in this presentation.
Elimination plan. And so we had to work together to find one that would work. And we did. The state said that we were on track to eliminate our deficit in 3 years. This did not solve the deficit problem, but it took it from being a crisis to being just a situation that needs to be managed. This is what it looks like. Now, if we fell further into debt, that's what the purple line represents. And that would be a problem. The state would be after us for not following the plan. However, if we had 4 fewer teachers than last year, we'd be all set. We'd have a nice little cushion. If we had 8 fewer teachers, it'd be even better. In fact, in August, we had 12 fewer teachers than we had last year, and a very nice cushion. However, the district decided to try to get out of debt in 1 year. This gap is the source of some of our problems. This is the gap that we should be concentrating on because it gets us out of debt in 2 years and puts us on track to be out of debt a year ahead of schedule. We have plenty of time. One of the things that's happened in our rush to get out of debt too fast is that the student-teacher ratio has been calculated incorrectly. 82 teachers times 31 students is 2,542, but that is not the capacity of our district. What it does lead to is massive overloads. 78% of the high school classes in the month of September were overloaded. In order to calculate the student-teacher ratio correctly, you have to take into account teachers who have no students when they're on their prep, teachers like special education teachers who are in classrooms with their students, and teachers who work one-on-one with students. If we look at local school districts, Saginaw High has a ratio of 15:1. That's what we had last year, and it was a little low. Arthur Hills at 18:1, Swan Valley 19:1, Merrill 19, 20, 20, 20, 22 for Birch Run, and 22:1 for Frankenmuth. A ratio of 15:1 is low. We've said so in negotiations for years. 18 or 20:1 is about right. 31:1 will never work. It will always lead to overloads. It also led to changing schedules because the effort was made to make it work when it never could. And changing schedules was very disruptive. Trying to pack 31 kids into every classroom as a formula and changing the schedules to match that is educationally unsound. The period September to November is prime time in education. That's when classroom routines are established, classroom rules are established, the school culture is established, the behavioral expectations and the academic trajectory for the year are all established. If we look at Lincoln High School, over the last 2 years, it went from the 23rd percentile to the 5th percentile. Reuben Daniels Middle School went from the 14th percentile to the 8th percentile. Instead of focusing on getting out of debt this year, we need to focus on staying out of trouble with the state and building our academic program, especially given the fact that we have 2 priority schools in our district. The teachers had in mind a different kind of year this year. We look forward to maintaining financial discipline, strengthening the academic program, strengthening the behavioral support program, cutting some staff, adding to the program with a reading series in K through 8, a math series in K through 8, and hiring academic coaches from within the teaching staff. We also figured that
I want to see the facts.
Yeah.
We want to see our teachers had in place that was not provided.
My time is up. If anybody wants to defer to Mr. Amber in a moment.
Dennis Barlow.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Barlow, and I play two roles in this district. One as the college access coordinator, and the other as a dad of a high school senior in Bridgeport High School. For the next 3 minutes, I will play the role of dad. In the fall of 2011, my wife and I entrusted this district with educating our son. For the first 3 years, we were pleased with his educational process. This year has been a complete 180-degree turn. In the beginning of this year, our son was forced to be educated in classes with enrollments above 60 students per teacher. Secondly, he was placed in our E2020 online class for trigonometry. For the first few weeks, and I believe it was 3 or 4 weeks, of this class, he had no coursework loaded in the computer for him to work on in 4 weeks. 60 students in one class, no coursework. Please tell me, where is the thought for my son's education and of those students who are in the audience behind me? Thirdly, my son was placed in academic leadership class for 7th hour, being taught by our superintendent. We asked and were notified that our superintendent had never been in the class to teach. 7.5 weeks later, into the marking period, which I mind you is only 9 weeks, the academic leadership class was dissolved and he was placed into guided math. I would like to know how a student who is number 6 out of 116 in your senior class is placed in a class for math help. Please tell me that. Lastly, to the board, and I will not say names, so it might incriminate me later. To the board, I would ask you to put your feet in my shoes and the shoes of those parents behind me. How would you feel about things that are going on? What changes would you want to see? Our students' education is priceless. Thank you.
Business owner, and your varsity softball coach. I have been apprised by my players and my child about all the chaos that has been in the school district this year so far. My specific concerns right now, I got 3 of them. One is lack of communication, not only with the students in the class, but the ones that attend the AirNet, ISD, for their career classes. They have no idea what's going on most of the time, because all announcements, all communications are done in the afternoon. When these children, these young adults, are attending up in Bay County. So we need to improve that communication. Another thing that's irritating is the constant progress reports. I think it's called, it was TIES before, I don't know what it's called now. Skyward, thank you. But I'm getting emails 7 days a week that say the same darn thing, that nothing has changed. They're not current, and I take it back, they were updated 2 weeks ago. At 4:01 a.m. Yeah, so we need to get that fixed, please. I have had 3 children in this district, and I'm very proud of my children. I'm proud of my players. because we have an excellent group of kids here that need to be taught right and taught well. My third point I had was lack of communication with coaching staff. I have been your varsity softball coach for 7 years, as most of the board knows. I have repeatedly asked for access onto the website to update it for the softball. What's on there is from previous coach 9 years ago, welcome him as the varsity coach.
And it's a new website.
And it's the same stuff on this new website.
Right.
So I have had no access to update any of my players' counselors. We've had 7 years of academic all-state team. That's because we work as a team to help each other. And I just expect the board not only to be part of the board, but to be part of the team. To help our kids, because they deserve it, they need it. Thank you.
I'm Jason Pogue. I'm an 11th grader at Bridgeport High School. I've attended Bridgeport, the school district, my entire life. I've also lived in the area my entire life. I've always loved to say that I went to Bridgeport. I was proud of the district and I loved being in the district. I loved all my teachers I've had in the past. They've all just always helped me through everything. Now this year, we've had complete chaos at the high school between class sizes and everything else. And like Jalen mentioned, we have not had a physics teacher since about the 2nd or 3rd week of school. We've had a substitute that was not qualified. The first substitute, she was there for about 3 to 4 weeks, and then she quit. And then we got a completely different substitute that was there for 2 weeks that quit this last Friday. Today, in the class, it was just another staff member from the building. She was not even a teacher as our substitute teacher. I was just kind of have questions on how are my grades going to be put into Skyward, seeing that the marking period ends this Friday. And I've had 3 different teachers and not a single grade is in Skyward so far. I also have another question about accelerated classes. In the past, I've been in accelerated classes, and I always thought that they seemed to work. There's a group or two to where they had about like 30 to 60 kids per grade in what they call accelerated classes. Even if the classes were not accelerated in the curriculum-wise, they're accelerated in the input of the students. They had students that achieve higher in the classes that cause less distraction. This, for me and many other students that are in my class, helped just because we had more time with the teacher and you didn't have distractions in the actual class. That's all I have to say. If Mr. Amber wants to finish the presentation, the rest of my time can
How much time do you have?
And that involved placing staff according to their strengths, having enough staff for student needs, and keeping class sizes reasonable. We know these things, but no one is listening or even talking to us. And our good people being hurt, mostly kids. To summarize, we came together in the spring and solved the financial problems of the district. Most people who knew anything in the district's central office were fired. Mr. Hill insisted on using the 31-to-1 formula for over a month, causing huge class sizes. Principals were forced to reschedule over and over to achieve the 31-to-1 ratio, which could never be achieved with too few teachers and too many students. We've lost the prime educational time of September to November because of constant disruption and loss of support. Nothing has been built, only dismantled. The casualties, in the end, are the students, those we exist to serve.
My name's Sharclea Mams, and I'm a senior at Bridgeport. On the second week of school, I was placed in the classroom to take an online class known as E2020, where most students is placed to recover credits. I was assigned to take Spanish 1, a class I do not need to graduate, but was placed there due to lack of options. From the second week of school to the present day of October 27th, there has been 3 different teachers over this program. 2 weeks ago, I was informed that we are now doing marking periods and no longer semesters, like the past. The online class I am taking requires headphones and a microphone. I have not yet received neither. This online class takes approximately a little over a semester to finish. I asked my teacher how will I be graded for the marking period. She doesn't know. She has been the teacher over this program for the last 2 weeks and have not been given a rubric or proper instructions. I brought it to higher authorities on how will I be graded for the marking period. I received no silent answer and have been given a runaround. Us seniors are suffering from an enjoyable senior year due to unauthorized chaos in the school. Why aren't we receiving silent answers? It feels as if some of the higher authority doesn't care or even have an answer. I understand you all have jobs to do and is working for a paycheck to support your family, pay bills, and to live. But going into education, it's not all about the money, it's more about the dream.
I'm a senior in Bridgeport High School, and first of all, I want to say that sit-in was no miscommunication. It was because we wanted to be heard, and nobody was listening. Still not listening. But I am also in E2020 class, and I can't tell you one thing I learned off there. It took me a minute to even get a password. It took me about I just got it 2 weeks ago. And another thing is all the good teachers are gone. Nobody is there. It's all substitutes throughout the whole building. All the kids always in the hallway. We have hall monitors, but students still are in the hallway, and I feel like I'm not gonna graduate on time because I need my English credit. So I wish somebody could do something about it. An employee and a parent. We've lived here about 12 years. I've had 2 boys graduate from the school. Thank you, they're gone. I have 1 more who still has to go 2 years. And I've given her the option of changing that if she would like for the first time this year. Because we are 2 months into the school year. She had Spanish with 54 students for the first month, and they watched movies. She had geometry for a month, and then they switched it to a 10th grade, so she started over the same assignments. Another month wasted. Now, we are 1 week, well, not even a week away from grades, and how is she getting grades? We already had students come up and talk about the physics class and the fact that there isn't a teacher in there teaching. These are classes that they need to go to college. They need physics, they need geometry, okay? They may not need the Spanish class, but it looks good. They've learned nothing. Nothing. 2 months of school has gone by, and we can't get that back. Even if you fix it, yay, you fixed it. You can't go back and teach them that month. You're not going to have them going into the summer to make up what they've missed at the beginning of this year. I'd also like to know what we gained by getting out of debt in 1 year. Because I've seen what this school has lost by getting out of debt. The BST program, I worked there. I collected data on that program. I know what benefit it gave our students. The kids that actually moved on to the next grade because of the tutoring they got in that classroom. and now they have nothing. I'd like you to think about that.
Well, coming here today, I thought I made the wrong choice. I made the hardest choice of my life, and I took my son out of Bridgeport when my son wanted to do exactly what his brother did, graduate from Bridgeport, because we've got beautiful, wonderful teachers who graduated from the U of M Ann Arbor with a Bachelor's of Aerospace Engineering. I don't know what to say. I am totally disappointed. My family's been in Bridgeport since 1936. And this is where I wanted to go to school. I came back to give my kids a choice to go to the best school there was around. I don't know what to say, but I cried. I went and saw some teachers to say, I'm pulling my son out of here because I did not want him left behind, which Bridgeport is going to do. I wanted him to, he wants to go to Ann Arbor, and Bridgeport's not going to allow him. That was the hardest decision I ever made in my life. And as a parent, I still live in Bridgeport. I'm still attending these board meetings, and I'm still going to fight for every other student out there because they're my kids.
Well, I don't know if I'm last or near last, but I appreciate everybody's input. It really sides with what I'm going to represent. So there's a few things I'm just going to cover that has not been covered yet. I'd like to know more. Mr. Chapman, you gave a report out, talked about the discipline, how it went from 1,000 to 7. One of the things I'd like to know is last year, how many of those individuals had after-school activities? Athletics, chess club, book club, debate club. The reason I ask that is because we talked about we're in priority, 4%. I think that need to be looked at, reviewed, and really emphasize saying it's not releasing the teachers, but it's building a structure. It's understanding what we need here, during school, after school. When kids come here to school, they're looking for support, looking for structure. And if it's not here, where do they go? Now, anytime a child leaves a school here and they don't have an after-school program, whether it's sports or anything else, we don't know what's there. Most parents work until 5, 6, 7 o'clock. Some parents are working double shifts or whatnot. So it's good to have a structure here to support young individuals. We have a lot of passion, got a lot of athletes, academic athletes. It's wonderful. When I volunteer in the school, I love seeing the kids, a lot of bright futures. But if we don't support this structure and we keep releasing teachers, your teachers is part of your structure. They're your pillars to the school. They're the ones that can help define things. They're the ones that we could go to and say, can you help coach? Can you help volunteer? Can you help? Because these are the individuals who are the extension of the parents, and they're the extension of their families when they're here. How many hours are they spending at home with their parents? If we say from 5 to 10, that's 5 hours. But in school, what are they spending with the teachers? 8 hours? There's more lifetime in a school during their childhood than there is at home. So I think the reflection that's there when we're taking a look at the different scenarios we have in place, the structure's getting broke down. The structure may have been broke down, now it's even broke down more. You can't go into a system or a business that is struggling and bust it up with a hammer without the communication or understanding of what your next plan is. I went to Mr. McCarthy, helped me out, tried to understand. My son's a 3-point student. Why out of 7 classes, 3 didn't have grades and 3 refs? Didn't understand. Doesn't make sense to me. We go to dig in, he finds out. At the end of the day, I'm trying to find for my son what's going on. My son's giving me a thing, he's like, I have no idea what's going on, Dad. I get a new teacher every day. Okay? Again, this structure's been broken down. It needs to get flipped right away. The only way that I can resolve this is asking my son, do you want to go somewhere else? And this is what we've got going on right now. This is what I have empowered to make sure my son has the ability to move on. So when we talk about colleges and universities, if we're in priority, I think our priority as an individual is to make sure our child's taken care of. So myself, I'm getting an apartment in wherever town he wants to go, I'm going to send him. He wants to stay here because he loves Bridgeport. He loves the kids that are here. He's very passionate about it, and I still put my time in here. But it's got to be taken care of. So I'd like to know about the after-school programs. The other part is when I talk about the payouts and the management situations, okay, management before messed it up. Question I'd like to know is, were the people or the persons involved now disciplined? And if they were, what were the disciplines? On top of that, I did hear from somebody, and it was passed on through rumor, that somewhere up in, I'll say up in the upper management, there was a statement, while we go through this plan and the transaction, there will be casualties. My son's not going to be casualty. No child's going to be casualty. You can't have that situation. I've been in places where it's been tough. I understand the situation. I know how to restructure. I've been through it. I've done it time after time. This is not the way to do it. You just can't. If you guys needed help, I would have been there. You would have put a message out, but I don't know how to reach anybody. When 2 weeks ago, when the reports came out, when I found out the grades were Fs, I called every single, I just had to come into school, like, where do I find, where do I get? I mean, it took me some effort to figure out what's going on. I have 2 businesses in 2 different cities, and I came from another city here just to figure that out. So my time is precious when I'm here. When I'm here, I just shut it all down and help the kids out too. I just hope I can expect the same from you guys. So, thank you.
Jimmy Sanders. I would like to thank the Bridgeport Spalding School District for recognizing me as the Grand Marshal during the 2014 Homecoming Parade and football game. I consider it a great privilege that you thought enough of me for such a tremendous honor. I was really touched by so many of the young men and women who play basketball or baseball show up during the event. It brought back so many good memories. I will be forever grateful for this day of recognition. Again, thank you so much, Jimmy Sanders.
First, I want to take a moment to thank everybody for their commentary, especially to the students. 2 years ago, when I returned to Michigan, my 3rd grader experienced a teacher that went out 3 weeks into school, and we had to sub for the remainder of the year, so I know what you're going through. All right. Let me finish, please. Thank you so much. Number 2, we have a contract with a company that ensures why the people are qualified to come in here and sub. At this point, I want to recognize Ms. Nagy, Tony Nagy. Please stand. She's our new food service person, so everybody can recognize you. Yep. To the 8th grade middle school for undefeated season, congratulations. A couple of points, because I don't want to belabor some of the things. I think that anytime that we found a school district in particular in so many buckets of accountability, the first thing that we did was one of the corrections that we made in our mathematics department. The correct sequence, according to the state of Michigan, is Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. We were teaching Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry. We were not following the Michigan merit curriculum. No, that was, as we entered this fall, this school year, that was one of the corrections we made for the 14-15 school year. The other thing that I want to point out, because to some degree I know that it's been a bone of contention, the state of Michigan does not have a minimum or maximum requirement for class time instruction. And I know that sometimes we've taken the 7th hour, and when you're a priority school, it should be offered as extended learning time. As long as you meet the 175 days of instruction, which we do in 1,098 hours, and that comes from the state of Michigan. So there's a lot of schools that have done things with that time. I want to end tonight by asking, I think that sometimes I could go through the data packet that I have from a former teacher about the BST room and all the concerns that they had in there. But at some point, some of this doesn't serve a purpose because we're going back and forth and back and forth. I would be more than happy to give printed copies because it was one of our former teachers who was in that room. So I'd like to end with this. Attitude. The longer I live, the more I realize the tremendous impact attitude has on every aspect of my life. Attitude is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successors, or that what other people think or say or do. Attitude is more important than appearance, ability, or skill. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding our attitude or how we'll embrace that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change how other people will act or react. And we cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is live one day at a time and strive to take the positive attitude wherever we go. I am convinced that life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% of how we react. Our attitude, more than any other factor, will ultimately determine the quality of our life. I want to point out a couple things before I turn it back over to the president. Is at the beginning of this presentation, we had Mr. Chapman roll out the decrease, the downturn in discipline. And that's taken right from Skyward. And I appreciate some of the parent comments about Skyward because that should be up to date. So I just want to again thank everybody for coming out. Hopefully we'll continue to show up and stay involved because I think you're right, whoever mentioned they've never seen this many people here. My first board meeting, it was me and the reporter. So thanks for coming out and have a great evening. At this time, Madam President, I'm making a motion with the Board of Ed to go into closed executive session, please, for the purpose of discussing discipline of an employee, former employee. Confidential matter.
I'm gonna call my husband.